In a world driven by noise, outrage, and impulse, has become rare. This by Nature podcast. Discipline and self-mastery in a chaotic world.
All right, guys, welcome back. Episode 2 of Stoic by Nature podcast. I just want to start off by shouting out to people who like and comment and have stayed tuned with me. Thank you very much. It is appreciative. Also, I just want to highlight the fact that I am not monetized on YouTube. So if you do in any way, shape or form want to support me or the channel or what I speak for, please like, comment and subscribe on all platforms. And also, would you please do me a favor? Use the link provided below. Get in contact. It's one of many ways you can support. As I said, I'm not monetized by YouTube or the Google Corporation, so it helps a lot, more than you know. So I just want to start off by saying that. Send in your questions, comments, thoughts via PayPal. The link is below. Also check out my website. I have a lot of merch on there, so there's that also. Today we are going to be looking at evolutionary differences with certain things to do with risk, emotion, aggression, stuff like that, fear, all to do with masculinity and femininity and how that plays a role in biology. So let's get that work in. Here we go. We're going to break it down a little bit. In terms of risk and emotion, there are a lot of differences, as you know. Females are a lot more emotional, as they have to be. They are nurturing beings, and their mindset is of a social nature, meaning that they sheep together with other females. They also seek social confirmation. So they are a lot more emotional. So when it comes to do with things like that, they often group together. Conversely, they are less likely to take risk, and they have a lower threshold for wanting to take risk, because this goes back to evolutionary differences in looking after your offspring, right? The more risks you take, the more likely you are to risk the safety of your family. And also, they are less likely to get involved in any type of conflict, whether it's to do with anger or anything like that. So there's that also. Because of that, males have a higher threshold for stress and anger also. Women are less likely to exhibit such aggressive traits in terms of physical altercations. They're less likely to get physical when they're angry. Anger then, it was evolved as a tool used to resolve conflicts. So generally speaking, if you had an idea and two people are butting heads in terms of who's right and who's wrong, normally it would be solved due to conflict. Whoever was the most violent was able to back their ideas more. And also it has potential reproductive benefits if you are successful. Depending on how dominant you are, how aggressive you are, these things you were rewarded. Now, there's also the disgust element of risk, where if you take a risk in a social environment, losing or being on the losing side of that risk factor, there is social repercussions to that. And as I stated, women are less likely to take gambling risks. They have a lower threshold for risk taking because they're not wired that way. Also, there's the fear aspect. The fear of losing anything could also result in massive repercussions in terms of your family name and your offspring as well. So they are biologically hardwired to not take risk. They seek comfort and nurturing instead. I touched on aggression earlier, and I think one of many differences, as we can all agree, in terms of males and females, that males are a lot more aggressive in terms of anything, in terms of the pursuit. We're a lot more aggressive in. Doesn't just mean physically aggressive, it just means more assertive and more dominant. You can see this in sports, in combat, in any type of competitive environment, and also when it comes to rearing children as well. Males are the more authoritative and dominant type when it comes to that manner. In terms of aggression, a little bit deeper, there are a few types of aggression. There's disgust and jealousy in terms of mate selection. There's reactive and proactive aggression. So proactive aggression, there was no trigger. It's premeditated, it's goal orientated, you're doing this with something in mind. This is a trait often shared with our late ancestors, the chimpanzees. Seems a bit weird, but yeah, this is often expressed through things like social manipulation. Reactive aggression leans towards more a self-defense aspect. So if you can preempt something is about to happen, this will trigger a reactive aggression response, whether it be physical aggression or not. Then there's sexual jealousy and mate competition. This stems from more of a evolutionary drive to ensure genetic inheritance. And also, I just want to note that males in general are a lot more sexually jealous than females. They have a higher rate of aggression when it comes to that. And also, this is why when there are conflicts between males and females in terms of sexual infidelity, males tend to be a lot more aggressive with that manner. Could you imagine, a civilization where aggression was looked upon in a negative manner? And I know a lot of people who don't understand or don't look at the biological aspects of your emotions and how to control them, they would perceive that as a negative thing, or being aggressive is a bad thing. Well, yeah, dummy, when you use it in a negative way, of course, that goes without saying. But as I stated earlier, there are many different avenues of aggression you could take. I'm not promoting being aggressive in terms of physically aggressive. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when you are in pursuit of some sort of accomplishment or greatness, you should definitely seek a more dominant and aggressive state when you are completing such tasks. Competition, fighting, working, you should definitely ascend to a higher train of assertiveness. So there's that. We're also going to touch on how biology, all of these things that I've stated are biological factors and differences in terms of males and females. We're also going to look at how modern culture denies such biology, in the sense that there are more swaying arguments leaning to biological factors are more socially constructed than biologically constructed, which is complete and utter waffle. You might ask, well, how does that even work? How does culture deny biology? How does social constructs deny biology? Many ways. Many ways. Let's look at how we are separated as a human nation, as we dive into things like sex, gender, race, the monetary standpoint that you hold in your life, whether it be, how rich you are or how poor you are, for example. These are just baseline factors in how social constructs split us up as a distraction. But I think sex and gender is one of the biggest ways. So, for example, the separation of sex and gender, even that implication itself, just implying that it's socially constructed. In terms of the sciences, they have not found a homosexual gene in your body, meaning that from when you are born, your gender is your gender. If you are a male, you are born to like females, and if you are a female, you are born to like males. That is just the way that it is. There is no gene or construct within you from when you are born to state otherwise. You can look at this in terms of your genitalia, in terms of your chromosomes, in terms of how you look, how you think, and how you act. The social construct is the normality of such things like LGBTQ, the trans movement, and etc., etc. But it's been flipped on its head to tell you that you can identify as a fucking sheep tomorrow if you wanted to, and that there are certain laws, depending on what country you stay in or reside in or travel to state that however someone wants to be identified, you have to identify them. You have to address them as such. And we have social constructed norms now in terms of pronouns and things such of this nature, where it's totally normal for me to identify as one thing today and to force society to address me as such. I just need to let you know that this is mental instability. You have problems if you are someone who is enforcing these kind of things. It's quite sad to say, because there are a lot of people who will stand up and say, well, no, I'm normal and this is how it is. But I hate to inform you that it isn't. It is not normal to suggest you are something that you are not. It is even less normal to suggest other people call you said something that we can clearly see you are not. Now, I just want to state for the record that I have no issue with the trans movement or LGBTQ in any form, but I do have an issue with how it is pushed on society and how it has become a social norm, in accepting that we push it onto kids and we make it part of everyday norm. I think this is a problem. Leave the kids alone, for sure. Leave the kids alone. Don't be inhibiting thoughts into them before they are able to make any such decisions for themselves. But there are a lot of debates around things like same-sex bathrooms, males and females competing in the same category in sports or competition, and all of these kinds of things. And I think, generally speaking now, the world's been tilted to make you believe that things that are not normal are normal and you should accept such. People like me are here to stand up and say that that's not right. Even things like the academic departments and a lot of social sciences are pushing agendas that suggest biological differences between sexes are socially constructed, just because politically it is the correct thing to do, but factually it isn't. So these kind of topics are being dismissed and shunned if you speak upon such. And again, there's discussions on, nature versus nurture, right? So human behavior and how biology plays a role into that. There are a lot of discussions as to how that is socially constructed in terms of biologically given to you. And this kind of thing is biology is downplayed and just shunted aside. Obviously this is in order to avoid the link between things like scientific racism and eugenics and biological discrimination and stuff like that. This is the type of terminology that people up there use to describe factual biology. It's weird. Very, very, very weird. So let's look at how males and females address stress and how we handle stress differently. I think there are a lot of, basic and common sense reasons why. But also there are a lot of reasons why a lot of people may not think that these are the case. So there's the hormonal factors, right? So women in general, they release oxytocin and cortisol. This promotes more of a nurturing mindset and standpoint in terms of your behavior. While males, because we produce less oxytocin but more testosterone, this makes us, one, more aggressive, and two, more likely to handle stress for the long term. So, for example, 1 unit of stress for women compared to males is handled very, very differently. If you give a female 1 unit of stress, it takes them 24 hours to deal with that, whereas conversely males can deal with that in about an hour. And I think this is for the most part as to why females are a lot more emotional. They're dysregulated a lot more. It throws them off in terms of their balance and their emotional stability, because they're less likely to be able to handle stress. Also, there's the matter of the brain, right? Neurons in females' brains, they clear the communication a lot slower. This means that if a signal for stress is given, it takes them a lot longer to deal with it. Stress is prolonged in the female mind, but conversely, because males exhibit testosterone, we're more likely to deal with stress. And in fact, we inhibit stress, meaning that we kind of take it in a lot better. Males' brains are wired differently and show a higher reactivity in the brain area that stress is associated to, meaning that the brain areas that are linked to stress, males deal with that stress a lot better. Whereas females, conversely, not only are they not equipped to deal with it, they also don't want to. There's also behavioural and social factors. So, for example, males exhibit more of a fight or flight response, meaning aggression or fear. Females exhibit a little bit of a different response. I like to call it pretend and befriend, meaning that they are more socially adjusted to group together with other females. And this flight response, women tend to seek nurturing. It comes from a nurturing standpoint. They want to please everyone. They're less likely to deal with confrontations, which is why they are like that. Let's talk about coping styles as well. So, for example, the way that women deal with stress, if it's bottled up, it comes up as verbal aggression. But also women want to talk more, and they're more concerned with the attention of talking about stress rather than actually dealing with the stress, for the most part. Males, on the other hand, we're more logical in the sense that, well, problem plus solution equals problem solved, right? And I think, for the most part, generally speaking, females want to know that you are listening to them rather than giving them a solid pathway to deal with that stress. There's also cultural expectations as well. So, for example, males, no one really cares about male stress or the male metric of mental health. But also we are, you know, looked at as if to say, well, this is your job. You should deal with stress. No one's going to come and save you in that area. Whereas conversely, and I think it's right, that females are a lot more likely when they go through stress, they have a lot more help, because they are more emotionally dysregulated when it comes to dealing with stress. There's also rumination, which means dwelling on negativity. Females are more likely to become either depressive or anxious because of thoughts that they cannot escape or have made up themselves. And because of this, they're more likely to dwell in the moment over something that's really, really good or really, really poor, negative. As I said, this leads to anxiety, depression in females, whereas in males, it leads to drug abuse, it leads to mental health disorders, and it also, worst case, leads to suicide. And this is why, for the most part, I practice and also preach stoicism, because the more that you can relate to your emotional needs and regulate your emotional level, the less likely you are to exhibit these behaviors and even put yourself in a situation where that is normal or normalized. If you do want me to touch on this a little bit more, I'll be happy to do so. I only briefly touched on some biological and neuroscientific factors for you. Just something for you to think about, you know. But I think a lot of this will appeal to a male audience a lot more, because stoicism is, you know, it is appealing to the male mind rather than the female mind. But I just want to touch on how females can exuberate this behavior as well. There are a lot of ways how females can come across stoic. So for males, we attach to stoicism because a lot of our core values and our virtues align with traditional ideals of masculinity. Things like emotional control, resilience, inner strength, and controlling your ego, for example. These are all on the list. But obviously, because there is a lack of role models in our society, it forces certain males of hypermasculinity to step up in that void as well. This creates the idea for such stoic philosophy. And for the most part, there are going to be a lot more males exhibiting stoic behavior than females. Just by nature, that is what it is. But how women apply stoicism, and I think this is kind of interesting, is a lot of women will go around and say, well, I'm independent, I have a job, I can do everything a man can do, which, by the way, is not going to help you in the long run when it comes to mate selection. But, you know, they fight for equality and independence, let's say, or feminism. I think this has ruined a lot of females, and I think that it's confusing a lot of women to think that this is the way forward when it isn't. But this is generally how females exhibit stoic behavior. They create unrealistic approaches to emotions. So, for example, you'll find a girl who comes across you and she says, "What's your star sign?" And she will judge you and talk to you and treat you based on your star sign, which is absolutely crazy. You get girls who are spirit guides or tarot card readers, or these kind of things are socially constructed into females' minds, thinking that they can control their emotions, when actually you're just mentally ill. You find a lot of women who are single, 30, have been through a lot of trauma with these kind of behavioural traits. But for the most part, females, how they exhibit stoicism in the wrong way is by claiming that they are strong and independent, and they can do everything a man can do, and they can work, and they can be a single mother. And you know, there are even situations where females are married in a happy marriage, and they sit there and say, well, this man is boring because he doesn't give me toxicity, and they leave him. Quite crazy. But yeah, let me know if you think that I missed anything out, guys. As I said, I just briefly touched on the matter in terms of biological indifferences, socially, how things are constructed in our culture nowadays, or lack thereof, and also how it applies to neuroscience as well, in terms of how your brain is wired and how it works. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Let me know how you feel about the situation. I know I put a poll up and got you guys to vote on what you wanted the next episode to be. So this is down to you guys. But as I state again, thank you for all your patience. And thank you for sticking with me. And as I say, please just remember, I am not monetized by YouTube or any Google corporation. So if you do, for whatever reason, like what I have to say, or are interested in the topics that I speak, or know me personally and just like having something to watch, please guys, like, comment, subscribe to any channel that has a subscription, and also please use the link provided below, not just to look at some merch, because there is some good high quality products, but also when I am doing these talks and giving these lectures per se, please send in your questions and comments via PayPal. This is one way that you can majorly support the channel. So, but for me guys, that will be it, and until next time, love and peace.